Well, it's an honor to meet with all of y'all today. Thank you for taking the time for this dialogue. I can't speak for y'all, but for myself, I find, especially today, I get kind of trapped in an echo chamber, and I find it difficult to get out and to listen to people who have opposing viewpoints. And so I really applaud all of you for being here. So before we dive in, I'd like to start by with a prayer to bless this meeting, with a prayer that's attributed to St. Francis. If you can, make these your own words. I encourage you. Let us pray. Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let us sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is discord, unity. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Grant that we may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
Amen.
So, primarily Kurt and I are here just really moderate discussion. We've got some food, we're just here just to talk. But I am going to give a brief intro about myself. So I'm going to actually start my story in 2013. I was recruited by a subsidiary of Michelin to come here from PepsiCo Frito-Lay. I was in the Northern Virginia area to come here to Austin, Texas. Now, my wife and I, when we were in Northern Virginia, we never liked living in the actual big city. We prefer the suburbs. So I was here for a couple months going to every single city within a 30 to 45 minute drive of Austin. And I was looking for an economically vibrant, a safe, and a welcoming suburb to live. I truly believe, and even still to this day, Georgetown is all that, and it's also charming. We've got one of the most beautiful town squares in the nation, definitely here in Texas, and it's something that my wife, coming from small town New York, really enjoys. I lived in the South before. I was stationed in the Navy 6 years. I have actually lived in the Deep South, but I've learned that American values always prevail, so I've never really been worried much about that. Interestingly enough, I don't really believe in labels, because I think labels divide us, but I'm actually aligned more with the conservative camp, if you will. And that's one of the reasons why I specifically chose Georgetown, even though I knew coming in here, had the statue, never bothered me. In May 2017, I was at the Georgetown Country Club when someone openly told me that interracial couples are despicable. Someone looked at me dead in the eye and said, "There's going to be a hanging." And someone else started a petition that people ended up signing where it said, there's on the board of directors, there's sugar and poop, and the poop has till Saturday to be gone. It reminds me of Martin Niemöller, where he said, first they came for the socialists, and I wasn't afraid because I'm not a socialist. They came for the trade unions, wasn't afraid, I'm not a trade unionist. They come for the Jews, wasn't afraid, and then they came for me. Racism had finally hit me, and it hurt my family and I very deeply. Shortly thereafter, in August 2017, I watched extremists use cities such as ours to be civil rights battlegrounds just because they had Confederate monuments. I watched what happened in Charlottesville and in Durham, and as a veteran myself, I was disgusted. I did not want the same to happen to our city. The thing is, right now, there's a lot of cities with monuments, but as that continues to decrease, Dallas, a lot of other cities continue to remove their monuments, I'm concerned that the status quo will rebrand us. We'll be known as one of the very few cities left that has not addressed their monuments. And I'm concerned that that's going to cause extremists on both sides to flock to our city and allow us to be civil rights battlegrounds. I'm afraid that that's going to create more controversy, and with that controversy, businesses are going to be more concerned about coming to a town such as ours and bringing us economic diversity. I think now more than ever we need healing and we need unity in order for us to remain charming, economically vibrant, safe, and welcoming. And I'm honored to be able to be chosen to serve as a moderator for this meeting, and I hope and I pray that we're able to have fruitful discussion. Kurt?
Thank you, Jonathan. My name's Kurt Hein. I'm a pastor of Light of Christ Church here in Georgetown. I grew up in small town Texas, Driftwood, Texas, if any of y'all know where that is. Maybe you know Salt Lick Barbecue? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I still think it's the best barbecue on the planet. But I grew up about a mile away from Salt Lick Barbecue, so Texas is deep in my bones. I love this state. I moved to Georgetown about 2 years ago. God called me to be a pastor of a small church up here. And really it was love at first sight. My wife loved it, which was important. But it also, the town square, like Jonathan said, is charming. It's beautiful, and it reminded me of a lot of the small towns that I grew up in and near, like Wimberley, St. Marcus, Fredericksburg. I mean, this is truly a wonderful city. And I'm going to be here long term. I bought a house just a few months ago, so yeah, thank you. So personally, the monument never bothered me. You know, I walked around downtown and I saw it as a historical artifact that points to a time in our past, and I think that's still the case for me. The thing is, after Charlottesville, I realized that different people have different views of what that statue means, and there are a diversity of views. I mean, many see that statue as an implicit support for things like slavery and segregation. And then what was really disturbing, and I think it disturbs us all, is to see neo-Nazis and other racist groups using a statue as a rallying point. And so I want to do two things. I think I want to proactively declare the values we all share and honor our history. And I do think we can do both those things. And I don't think we can ignore the national conversation. We have to somehow proactively and powerfully declare what we believe. And I think the reason is because we don't want other people answering this question for us. Right? I think that can turn ugly, divisive, create more wounding, and I believe Georgetown, we can do better. Finally, I hope you hear my heart. My heart's for unity, it's for healing. It's not to shame, it's not to wound, it's not to win. It's for forgiveness and for healing. I mean, imagine if instead of being further divided by this issue, we can come together around our shared values and declare those and have even more unity than when we began. I mean, what a testimony would that be, not only to this city, county, state, and our country. I think it could be a really powerful thing if we grasp it.
So with that, we over the next couple minutes, I think it's really important that, frankly, we learn to hear each other out. I learned something different just even by standing out there. I've never read the backside of the monument. As a veteran, I like reading about what other people fought for. I'm going to give everyone 5 minutes to share their perspective on different thoughts they may have. I'm asking that everyone please do their best to be respectful during someone else's 5 minutes. Be mindful of even your body language and how you can just be an active and a respectful listener. If you all don't mind, I'd like our female to go first. Jaquita, you have 5 minutes. I'm not trying to be terribly mean with time, but maybe in your final minute I'll raise my hand just so we make sure we are able to keep moving on. So, go ahead.
Okay, my name is Jaquita Wilson Kirby. I've lived in Georgetown 5 years now. I came to this town hoping for a better opportunity for my family, and I found that. I feel like this town has been the best place I've ever lived, coming from Newark, which is in New Jersey, and DC and Charlotte, North Carolina, and the different places that I've lived and visited. This has been the most welcoming space I've ever been in. However, there are caveats to that, and it starts with the statue. It starts with the fact that when I go outside of Georgetown and I say to people, well, will you come to a barbecue? Will you hang out? My husband and I are doing something for the 4th. And they say, oh, no, we're not going to Georgetown. Are you crazy? That's a dangerous place for people of color. Didn't you know that they put the Confederate statue there to make sure we would stay away? I'm like, no, I didn't know that. I didn't even know we had a Confederate statue. So I came down to look at it. And not only do we have a statue, on the back of the statue, it says, there's no braver patriot. And I took umbrage with that. I took umbrage with the Confederate soldier being equated with no braver patriot in our country. In a country where I felt like this was a rebellion that lost. And yet, they have the highest monument in our town square. And I could have lived with that if not for the fact that we also have plaques on the square that state that African Americans were pioneers in this county. And that's just untrue. And so when I learned that my children are coming to the museum and the square and being taught this is fact and history, I was very upset. One, because it's not factual. We were not pioneers. And two, because I don't want them thinking that it was okay to fight for them to remain as slaves under any circumstances. I don't want them to think that the town that they love doesn't necessarily love them back. I want them to love this town the way everyone who's grown up here loves it. And I want them to have that chance. They're growing up here. I might not have, but they are. And that's not fair to them. And so that's why I'm here, to discuss not removing the statue, but adding a plaque, to put some concepts so that we know what the facts were. And we know why we're here and we're having this conversation. It's because no one ever talked about the facts before openly. This is our chance to do that before someone else comes and decides it for us. Thank you.
Anything else to say?
No, I do not. I'm good.
Very much. Shelby, sir, you're more than welcome. 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir. I won't take anywhere near 5 minutes, but I think our position on this is pretty well summed up in what we call in the Sons of Confederate Veterans, the charge. I want to read that to you. It's very short. To you, Sons of Confederate Veterans, we will commit the vindication of the cause for which we fought. To your strength will be given the defense of the Confederate soldier's good name, the guardianship of his history, the emulation of his virtues, the perpetuation of those principles which he loved and which you also cherish, and those ideals which made him glorious. It is our responsibility and duty as a member of this organization to see that the true history of the South from that period is presented to future generations. We take that position very, very strongly. And so whenever we talk about compromises and whatnot, compromises of our principles are going to be very, very difficult. And unless there's a convincing argument otherwise, there probably will be none. I'm going to just say it right up front. Now, like Jaquita, I've lived in many places of the world. I have lived in many places in the United States. I have lived all over Texas. I am a native Texan. This is the best place I have ever lived in my life. It is caring, compassionate, generous, all the things that you would want to, whether you are a retired person or a person who's got young children who's coming in, that this is a great place. It was a great place when I moved here, and it's a great place now. It didn't suddenly change over the last couple of years. And that's all I have to say about it, sir.
Thank you very much. Anything else to say in your time?
I think that's fine.
I appreciate it. Rob Ranco, if you will, you have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir. And I want to thank you all for having me here today. And I have a few separate ideas. I'll try not to go too long. I was born and raised in New England and moved to Texas in 1993. Came here to go to school at the University of Texas. And, you know, that was an education. I've now lived approximately half my life in Texas since 2001 in Williamson County. Between Georgetown and Round Rock, more time in Georgetown, but also in Round Rock. And, you know, I came here, you know, with, you know, my bias. I grew up in small town New England, and it is different. There were similarities. I think the values are similar, somewhat the lifestyle, but for the weather is similar. So it wasn't, so, especially up here in Williamson County, that was not completely foreign as say downtown Austin was to where I grew up. And but I remember very distinctly, it was 1993, I was walking across UT, and as I was approaching the library up the green area there, I saw a statue off in the distance, and then it looked like it was an important statue, like a nice statue. As I got closer, you know, I was familiarizing myself with the campus, and as I got closer, I saw Davis, Jefferson, Davis, and I thought, well, we wouldn't have a big statue right in front of the library of Jefferson Davis. That was contrary to what I was raised to believe, and I concede that bias, that, you know, the Confederacy was not America, that there was a war fought, and it was the United States of America against the Confederate States of America, and those were two, attempting to be two separate countries at the time, and that was shocking to me. I don't want to use the word offended. I wasn't hurt to my heart. I thought, wow, that's really odd. That was shocking to me. So that's my context for when I first recognized that these statues even existed. I couldn't have fathomed that this would be something that people would celebrate. And I think certainly placing these things in public spaces and elevating them, as the Davis statue was as well, that's a place of honor. And I think that goes along with what Mr. Little was saying, was that, you know, it was an attempt and is an attempt to honor those people, that ideal. And I know so I'm for some compromise, some modification. I think as it exists right now, it's troubling to me. I think we can do better. You know, I reflect oftentimes, we personalize these things sometimes. We all have a desire, I think, to honor our ancestors, to be kind in our remembrance of them and the deeds that they did. But the thing that I keep coming back to is not all of our ancestors did everything they did is worthy of honor. Personally, you know, my grandfather, my dad's dad, I never knew him, never met him, because I don't think he was a good person. When my father was an infant, his father, brand new wife, brand new baby, decided he didn't want to do that. And so he up and left. And so my dad never knew his dad. There was no relationship. There was a disconnect from that whole family. I don't want to build him a statue. Now, it's not exactly equivalent. I'm not trying to say that it is. I'm making the point that I don't want to honor everything my ancestors did merely because I'm related to them. That seems ludicrous to me. So I still have a hard time that because they're my ancestors, we want to honor them. I bet we all have ancestors who made better choices than my grandfather did. And we all have ancestors who made better choices than to stand up for the ideals for which the Confederacy stood. And I think there are a couple of basic truths that lead me logically to my conclusion that something needs to be put in context, something needs to be done. And it's the idea that we can probably disagree, did slavery lead to the Civil War, or did it lead to secession that led to the Civil War, states' rights? I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit of that. One basic truth is, I believe, slavery was immoral and wrong. People of color, African Americans and others, are equal and deserve to be treated equally, deserve to have the same respect, the same rights, and the same guarantees of happiness that we all have. And if we believe those things to be true, how can we put on the highest pedestal in our county square a statue that stands for the proposition, what Alexander Stephens said in 1861, the first part I'll paraphrase and then I'll be done. You know, he's talking about the Union, and he talks about the Constitution of the Union. It says, they rested upon the assumption of the equality of the races. This was an error. It was a sandy foundation, and the government built upon it fell when the storm came and the wind blew. And then he goes on to say, our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite idea. Its foundations, the Confederacy, are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. This, our new government, is the first in the history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth. That's troubling, that to put that ideal, and I know that we're honoring the individuals, but the individuals who had the great physical courage to go into battle lacked the moral courage to reject that philosophy. So that's why I find it troubling. I don't think that reflects the values of Williamson County, the Williamson County that I know. And I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. Mr. Jeff Parker, 5 minutes, sir.
So as I've looked at this particular issue of the statute, I've lived in Georgetown since 2010, roughly. I am a native Texan. I've lived here, I've lived in Arizona, I've lived in Atlanta, Georgia. The first place I experienced racism was Atlanta, Georgia, when I was threatened and told that I was going to die by a group of people. I came back to Texas because I love Georgetown, much as everyone else here does. This is where I want to spend the remainder of my time on this earth. I believe Georgetown is a great community. My question has to be, though, as we begin to look at history and try and place those people in our time and judge them by our time, how do we do that? That's history. I was not there in that time. I don't know all the forces that were arrayed against them. I do know that Williamson County was the first county to vote against secession. The individual that placed that first vote went on to fight for the Confederacy. So I'm not sure it was a lack of moral courage that drove that so much as the time they lived in. As we look at this going forward, and I understand it's offensive to people. Everything on this square is offensive to someone. We've discovered that. Everything. I've already heard that the Dan Moody statue has to be removed because he broke the back of the Klan incorrectly. I find some of the statuary on the square itself offensive myself. It's not where I want to spend my time. As we move forward, are we going to look at any monument in Williamson County that's offensive to someone as something that has to be adjusted? That's our history. I don't see a way to adjust everything. It was interesting to me the other day when Brian Kilmeade came out and said, are we going to remove the memorials to the 9/11 victims? Is that what we're going to do 100 years from now? Because people are going to find that offensive. I can't answer that question. I don't have an issue with having an additional plaque there. I think that's probably the right thing to do. I don't want to see the statue removed, nor do I want to see any other statue removed. We've got people in Williamson County of Afghani heritage who would find the Nathan Chapman Memorial offensive. We've got a Vietnam memorial over there, that there are people here with relatives that died in Vietnam on both sides that would find that offensive. That is our history. I don't see any way to change that, nor do I see anything that, any good coming from removing it. I see Shelby down here on a regular basis talking to people in front of that statue. That drives conversation that I think needs to occur. If we forget our history, we will repeat it. I don't think any of us want to repeat our history. I can't see that happening. I don't want it to happen because I think that drives us backwards. Again, the statue, and I don't view this as a General Lee statue or to any one person. I had relatives fighting on both sides of that horrible war. I had relatives fighting in the war with the British. Relatives have always fought in wars. Much like you, I've got relatives that I'm not particularly proud of. I will laugh about them. I know I've got some outlaws back in my history. I will still laugh about them, and I think we need to discuss them at times. Because if we don't realize they were there, we forget about it, and it gets repeated. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
You still have 1 minute. You know your
No,
time.
I'm okay.
Thank you very much. Kurt?
Yeah. Well, thank you. Now it comes to our time for asking questions of each other. Please limit your questions to 15 seconds or less. So the purpose of this time is for us to learn more about those of differing viewpoints than ours. And I actually think a lot will be gained from this if we ask this in a spirit of being genuinely interested in the other person. So I'm looking forward to hearing what questions are out there. So who has the first question?
I'd like to start.
Yes, please.
I'd like to know how many people at the table know that there was a coloreds only and whites only fountain attached to the statue. Did anybody else know?
I only know because you told me the other day.
I knew that there was separate fountains, but I did not know that they were attached to this statue.
You two gentlemen?
I don't think that's correct,
No?
Jaquita.
Okay. Where were
I have not found anybody who knows what those are.
Okay.
But now I acknowledge there was a black and white separate fountains inside the courthouse in the foyer.
Yes.
There's no doubt about that.
Yes.
I seriously doubt that there was one attached to the
interesting.
monument. So if you can substantiate that, I'd love to hear it.
I found out that from the museum director, so I'll talk to her about that. My follow-up question to that is, if you do know, or maybe you don't, and you don't believe that that's a thing, you know, the context of the statue that hurts people so much is the fact that we see it, I see it, as a slap in the face when it was placed there during a time where people wanted brown people and black people to stay in their place, to not try to buy homes or move or live in this area. So
Try to phrase that
I'm saying
in a
that
question.
the question is, if the statue represents to black people a limiting of their life, power, happiness, is it their right to oppose its placement in that space?
Thank you for your question. Anybody can answer any question, by the way. Kurt and I are just here to moderate. Anyone can ask a question, anyone can answer a question.
I'll take that one on.
Thank you.
As I look at that statue, I think there are things that are offending to every human being in this community. And I struggle with understanding how a statue can impact anyone's life long term. Because there are things down here on this square that I find personally offensive. I'm sure that if we talk to a Native American,
Oh, for sure.
they would find some statues down there incredibly offensive.
Very much so.
So I struggle with an inanimate object impacting anyone's life in a significant way. And that's just from my perspective, because my heritage says, okay, you're part Indian, you're part white, so what? How does that impact me today? How does it impact me going forward?
May I respond to that?
Sure,
But she just told you that it is impactful
it
to her.
is.
And so, I don't know, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth or misinterpret. Are you dismissing that, or are you just saying, I don't understand what you're saying?
No, I empathize with it. I understand that it is impactful to her life. I also understand that there are other things that are impactful to other people's lives down there. And so how do we address that?
I think we can address it by acknowledging certain facts and truths. That's why I would like to see the plaque put up there. I personally feel like the statue does not acknowledge the whole truth. And with the plaque, which can be written by the Historical Commission, it would be an acknowledgement of the whole truth.
Okay.
And therefore impact how I see the town, impact how my children see the town, impact how people who look like me see the town. That's how I would answer that question, how we could move forward. It's not necessarily cut and dry that's going to change, like I'm saying, oh, if the statue goes or the plaque is there, it's going to change everybody's lives intricately. But right now we're living in a time where everything is in extremes. And if we're not
Yes.
doing something,
We can agree
I
on
think
that.
we can all agree there.
like if we're not doing something, we're doing nothing, and we're waiting for extremes to make those choices for us.
So I was in a discussion last night with an individual. I said, I think we're tracking in a very parallel path.
Yeah.
And I think our difference is down to just barely any difference. So we're never going to completely agree and close that gap, but we're still both working towards that same goal. We still want the same things. We want your kids and my kids and your kids and your grandkids, and your kids and your kids, all to grow up and have the right things. We want them to have good jobs. We want them to have a great place to live. Georgetown, to me, is still one of the best places in the world to live. I want to see that continue. I want to see, in Georgetown specifically, I want to see gathering spots. I think the downtown squares are great. gathering spot. I think we need 15 more of those scattered around this community.
I agree.
Because people are not going to drive 10, 15 miles to come to the square to do things.
This is true.
So my goal is that we have those. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, no, I think I love Georgetown too. It is a great town. However, I've met people of color in and around Austin and told them I live in Georgetown. And that oftentimes sparks a discussion.
Yes.
We have a reputation in Williamson County and in Central Texas. Well, in Williamson County itself has a reputation, depending on who you talk to. Georgetown in particular has a reputation with lots of folks, people of color in the greater Austin area. You meet somebody in Austin and you say, I live in Georgetown, and that doesn't usually stop the conversation. There's a response. You live in, oh wow, how is that? Especially if they know that my wife and children are African American.
Yeah.
That's a discussion. And wouldn't it be great, not that we have a duty to do PR for the city, but wouldn't it be great if Georgetown was also known as a place that maybe, raised an eyebrow from a certain community, but also is known as the place that, people are working to come together and concessions and reasonable compromises can be reached.
Well, I think that's what we're doing today.
Just so we can keep this to question and answer, not that people can't speak, but let's phrase that in the form of a question. Okay. First of all, do we have that reputation? And is it our responsibility to do something? So again, everyone's allowed to ask questions, everyone's allowed to answer.
That's
answer.
That's my question.
Okay, so I want to step into that one again, or do you want to first?
I would love to step
Go
into
ahead.
that one because I've had conversations about this. When I first started even entering the arena of Confederate statue, yes or no, it was under the guise that I could not get friends to visit us in this space under any circumstances. Free barbecue, free alcohol, still not coming. And trying to find out why, not being from here, not understanding why people wouldn't come to Georgetown. And so I think, yes, it is our responsibility to be PR for Georgetown because we want people to come here, not only for our own sakes, but economically. We cannot continue to grow and expand if we don't have people coming and spending their money in our spaces. And they're not going to do that if they don't feel comfortable. And I'm not saying we have to change everything about Georgetown, but these are the things, these are the steps that can be taken to say, okay, there's something different happening here that's not happening anywhere else, and it's done in a reasonable way. And if we can show the world, our suburbs of Austin, that we're willing to do something to encourage people to come to our spaces and be comfortable, even if they don't live here. I think that is incumbent on every citizen to do that.
So the questions again, do we have a reputation and whose job is it to do the PR?
I think definitively Williamson County does have a reputation as a law and order community, and I don't think that is a deserved reputation. I've heard the statement, come to Williamson County on vacation, leave on probation.
Yes. Yes.
I don't believe
Yes.
that's correct. I've been in and out of the jail since 2012. And as you talk to the sheriff, as you talk to the jailers, they say better than 20% of the inmates that are there not because they've committed crimes, but because they have substance abuse problems. I've seen the court system. I know a lot of the judges. Most of them look at Williamson County and go, how do we keep people out of jail? How do we keep, our job is not to punish people. Our job is to raise people up. Let's give them a chance. So I know Bill Gravel. I watch what he does. He works hard to keep young people from going to jail. Harder than any judge I've ever seen. He's not, oh, I'm going to send you away. It's, how do we keep you out of jail? Here's your chance. Here's how we're going to help you stay out. That reputation is out there. There is no doubt of that. Public safety, to me, is a big issue in this community. And I kind of want to separate Williamson County and the city of Georgetown because those statues set on Williamson County property, not Georgetown property.
You're correct.
Safety is an issue for us here in this community, Williamson County specifically. We don't spend enough money on law enforcement. But we have this reputation, and I'm not sure how the reputation came about. I'm really not, because I talked to the police here in the city. I was with Sheriff Shelby on Saturday, and he's going, man, if there's a problem in the county, I haven't got enough officers to cover the county. Any kind of issue, I got every deputy on staff at that issue. They're not out being proactive. So I continue to look at this and go, yeah, we do have that reputation. I don't know where it comes from, though.
Interesting.
And it's because I talked to those guys. I talked to Wayne Nero. He said, I've been in a number of meetings with him where he says, raise your hand if you've ever been stopped by one of my officers. And everybody in the meeting, right? Yeah, you've been stopped. We've all been stopped. And then he says, how many of you have been written a ticket? And it's generally less than 20% keep their hands up.
Interesting.
So it's policing on a level that I've never seen before. It's policing on the level of Mayberry. I hate to use that analogy because it's not
That's perfect.
accurate, but it is policing on the level of Mayberry. We're not here to punish. We're here to make sure everybody has a safe place to live.
Have you talked to people of color about this issue?
Generally, I have not.
Because I do know for a fact that I've been pulled over and received tickets, that I was able to go to court and get thrown out. And my brother is pulled over a lot just to find out where he's going,
Yeah.
you know. Usually he's not given a ticket because he's not speeding or driving without his license, but those things are not what the statute is about.
Correct.
What the statute is about to people of color, to myself in particular and my family, it's a symbol of what we consider hate. We consider that a symbol of hate. And the reason why I don't want it removed is because as long as it's there, I don't have to ever argue with people of color about is there racism in this space.
So
They just agree because the statute's there.
So my question is, what does it take to put a plaque out there?
It would
And
take
this is a
the
two-part
approval of the judge and then the approval of the historical commission.
Okay. So the
And-
county judge or the
Yes,
county
the county
commission?
judge, not the county commissioners. The county judge can sign off and say, it's okay if they put in an application. Because that's really all it's asking for, the application to ask to put a clarifying plaque. And then the county commissioners get the information and they write, not the county commissioners, I'm sorry, historical commission. They
The state
write,
historical commission?
yes, they write out the wording
Okay.
for it. And so my follow-up question is, why not the plaque? If there's no removal of the statute, why not the plaque?
That is not a question that I can answer.
Yeah.
What I can answer is Dan Geddes is not running for county judge again. So he will be leaving in 2018.
Okay.
I think we have all agreed that Georgetown and Williamson County is a great place to live. There's a reason that we all came here to live.
Yes.
That statue's been there for over 100 years. You may or may not have known that when you moved here. Actually, it's irrelevant. Because we came here not because of that statue and what it represents to whatever position you want to be from,
Yeah.
but for our own personal reasons, whether it's school, job opportunities, retirement, whatever it might be. So
Now, don't look at me and say retirement. I'm not retired.
you're not retired. I put everybody in the same boat there because I am, sort of. But the point being is, and Jaquita, you hit it right on the nail here, is that we have a total dichotomy of opinion here about what that monument and memorial represents and what it is. Okay? To us, it is a veterans memorial. It says right there, chiseled in stone, to the soldiers and sailors of the Confederacy.
Yes.
Doesn't say anything about white supremacy or slavery or anything else. It was put up in 1916. That period between 1890, let's say, and 1920, let's say, was the heyday of the erection of these monuments. Okay? Now, the fact is that at the same time, demographics being what they are, a lot of those veterans were starting to die off and getting very elderly. They were loved by their families. They were loved by their associates. What they did was in remembrance of their service, 1861 to 1865. It says it on not only just that monument, but every monument you will see erected to Confederate veterans has probably got those dates on there.
Shelby, could you kind of rephrase it for a question?
Yeah.
Into a
Big
question, since it's
Oh,
kind of a question and answer.
Well, I'm kind of answering.
Okay, what was the original question, just
Why
to clarify?
not the plaque?
Why not the plaque?
Okay, different question. All right, the plaque. The plaque, the application that I have seen from this group
Yes.
goes into all kinds of white supremacy, Jim Crow, racism, and KKK, all of that stuff,
Yeah.
which is not applicable to that monument. That is what we are saying. All of that stuff, granted that it happened, but that was well after
It's history.
the war.
Hold on. Yeah.
It was well after the war. It does not impact on those Confederate soldiers who served, and many of them died during that time period. That's what we're about.
Can I ask a follow-up question really quickly?
We still have about 5 more minutes of questions.
Just really quickly, I understand that, but we have a historical commission run by the state for a reason, and wouldn't we trust that, like, can we trust them to make sure the history is accurate on the plaque? I'm willing to do that.
I'm willing to do that also.
Okay.
I think that the truth in history, of course, there's many truths, but they are
Yes.
the arbiters
They're the
whenever it comes
arbiters.
to putting something basically in stone.
For sure.
That says, this is something that we have agreed here as the THC, Texas
Yes.
Historical Commission.
Yes.
And we are putting it here on the courthouse
Yes.
grounds because we know these things to be
Yes.
facts.
Yes.
May I ask
And
a-
I'm okay with that.
Thank you. May I ask a couple of really short questions? I think they're yes or no questions. Y'all can do what you want. Mr. Little said that Georgetown's a great place. I think we all agree with that. Can we also agree it hasn't always been a great place for everybody?
Well, I think you could say it of anywhere.
Yeah,
That's for sure.
I agree.
It's America.
I'm not setting us. I'm not making us worse. I'm not setting us apart. I agree that's applicable everywhere. But if we
so
can,
when I lived in Forsyth, in Atlanta, I actually lived in Forsyth County, a county that had a reputation up through almost 2000 says if you're black, don't let the sun set on you.
Yeah.
I never understood that.
Yeah.
Nor did I see it, but I got there after that.
So I think that's a yes. We can all agree that Georgetown, like every place else,
Like
hasn't
every
always
place
been great
else.
for everybody. And we can also probably all agree that slavery was wrong and immoral.
Slavery is wrong and immoral. It's still wrong and immoral today, and
Right.
it's still occurring today.
Right.
This is true.
So those are some simple truths. So here's my last question. Let's assume for the moment, I think it was erected in 1916,
Yes.
that reflected the social values of 1916 Georgetown. They believed as a community that no braver patriots had ever undertaken any task. Do we still believe that today, that that is the most important representation of our community values? Because the notion of representing history through statues, it is by definition incomplete. It's like ripping a page out of the phone book and saying this is our town. It's a piece. That is a piece of our history, yes. But to give it proper context might be more reflective of our community values. So my question is this: how often should Williamson County and other communities reevaluate what they put on their mantle? Just because it's been there forever, do we keep it there forever? Or like in our homes where we might have had a baby picture there 5 years ago, now we have a high school graduation picture. How often should we reevaluate what we put on our community mantle?
Interesting.
So that's one I struggle with,
Interesting.
because I look at the statue, and it is a memorial to guys who fought, and it was honor for them as they aged out. If we look at the Vietnam memorials,
Yeah.
those veterans, when they returned, were hated.
Yes.
They were treated like
Yes.
dirt,
Yes.
and to some degree still are.
Yes.
Do we go back and remove the memorials to those veterans? Or 20 years from now, do we go back and remove them? Or 100 years from now, do we go back and remove them? I don't know that there's a reasonable way for us to go back and judge people, again, based on the standards of their day as opposed to our day. I think, to me, the statues remain because those were erected in their day and based on their values. And we still talk about those values and what was going on and why things have changed. But I think we have to leave that out there for discussion.
And we may not have time for another question, but I will allow time for anyone else that would like to respond to that question that was asked. How often should we review the things on our mantle? Any other answers to that question?
Well,
we might not have time for another question, but you can.
It's a follow-up. Maybe you can answer in combination with that. Wouldn't it be nice to keep telling the story? So we erected something in 1916, which told one story. But as time's moved on, our community values, I believe, have changed since 1916, at least largely. So we could add something to it now. We could do the same thing in 40 years to keep telling the story of who we are and how we see these things. Because I agree with Jaquita that it's hard to look at the words "no braver patriots," and then you look at the Declaration of the Causes of the Seceding States. It's hard to get behind that mindset, but I understand context to a point. So what can be done? What about continuing to tell the story and reevaluate our community values in what we decide to put on the mantle?
Any other answers to that question? I will allow.
I will see this.
Definitions, perceptions, words matter greatly.
Yes.
And doesn't matter what context they're in or when they are given.
Yes.
Now, the inscription in stone on that monument, no braver patriots. They're not saying they're the bravest guys. No braver than those fellows who wore the gray.
Yes.
Okay? So we got to be careful about words.
Sure.
And so that, obviously we have different perceptions of what that represents and the context in which it stands. But our position is, like I say, it has no relationship to what happened later in the 19th century and the early 20th century, other than the fact that it was raised at that time. It was erected at the time in memory of those folks. And that is, to me, it's very, very clear, very cut and dried. I have no objection to the truth being placed, but we have to debate the truth.
So,
I would like to answer his question as well, if you can give me 60 seconds.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to maybe come back to that a little later, just because Ralph's question was the final question. So, recently, Kurt and I realized that we do have a lot of disunity in our community. But yet, when you look at the things you guys said, I just took a couple, random notes. It's actually funny how we all actually see this all the exact same. Mm-hmm. It's also sad that I'm standing out there and someone's automatically, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" I'm like, I'm just standing here trying to have a moment of silence, and that's what we need to bring it down a notch, And so Kurt and I were like, well, how do we bring it down a notch so we don't have the same outcome as other cities? And frankly, like I said, myself as a veteran, when I saw what happened in Durham, to me, I thought that's the worst possible outcome. To me, it's like toppling over someone's tombstone. I don't think that's the way to do something. It should be respectfully moved, But I hear what you all said. Jaquita, you said you don't want removal. Mm-hmm. Shelby, I respect the fact that you don't want the name of your ancestor tainted, And Rob, you're right that sometimes, we have an ancestor that's done bad things, but by golly, you say something bad about my grandpappy, I'm going to have to fight you. You know what I mean? It's
I'm good.
Yeah, it is what it is. But yet, Rob also agrees, just like everyone else, we want to honor our ancestors. And, Jeff, I like what you were saying about how we need to own our history. And the question is, do we go around and removing everything that's offensive? My generation is the one that's really having to deal with that. Everyone's offended about something. Everyone's offended about something. And especially being in a church plant, I deal with families that come in every week and they're offended about something because it's not the same way as their previous church, and I welcome them to go back, you know, because I can't run around in circles like that forever. Kurt and I, we were talking about how do we avoid the extremes? How do we avoid the polarity? And then we asked ourselves a question: who needs to do our PR for Georgetown? And I agree with you all that we have to own that. We have to own that. We can't, especially as theologians, you know, politicians unfortunately are motivated by number of votes. Business people, I was an MBA, are motivated by profit. Here as neighbors, we need to be motivated by doing the right thing, by unifying, by honoring each other's morals and values. So Kurt and I, we thought about it long, we prayed about it, and we said, what if we can't leave the current monument the exact way it is? Don't touch it, don't update it, and frankly, don't even put anything near it. Allow it to have essentially a moment of silence, kind of like we did down there. Honor it, own it, and say, this is part of our history. But one of the things about having a Dan Moody statue or a plaque is, I can't remember who said it, but when we elevate something to a certain height, you're saying that that's how high that ideal is for you. So what Kurt and I proposed is we elevate something to the same height. Something. We elevate something to the same height that says our ideals are this is part of our history, but there's another part of our history that's elevated to the same height. Without marring your ancestors, without saying anything bad about them, because no one wants someone to say anything bad about their ancestors, but elevating something else to the same height. We looked at a lot of different statues. Being a business person, I do something called benchmarking, so you look at how other cities or countries handle something, and I came across the Busa Emancipation statue. And it's basically someone they're breaking through chains, and chains are kind of hanging, and it celebrates and honors freedom. It honors the going away from oppression. And Kurt and I believe that can even honor people that are in modern day slavery, you know, like the sex traffic slavery, and them getting free from that. And it's saying that we honor anyone who's had to break through chains. Not honoring black people that break through chains, not honoring white people who break through chains, or Hispanics that break through chains, or women who break through chains, but everyone who breaks through chains. We believe that by doing that and elevating it to the same height, we don't have to disrespect anyone, we don't have to remove anything, and we're able to have this unity we're having right now across our city, and we pray that can be a catalyst or a model for other cities and communities to do similar, because I don't think erasing or moving your history is automatically the right thing. I'm going to allow Kurt to say a couple minutes on that if he has anything to share, and then if you'll notice on the agenda, there's 10 minutes set aside for all of you to give feedback. Mostly we've only been moderating. We're just proposing this idea, getting your thoughts. Kurt's going to say for a couple minutes, and then please feel free to share your thoughts on this idea.
Yeah, I was encouraged by something you said, Rob. You were talking about the mantelpiece, and then you said something about, well, our history, you know, continues. So I also hear you, like if we take away this statue, kind of where does that end? Because everyone will be offended at something.
Yes.
And as a millennial, I understand that. So I like the idea of continuing to tell our story. And so I think that's where we're coming from, Jonathan and myself. Maybe I believe that we can find our shared values, confess that we believe that slavery and segregation were wrong, and profess that we believe all people are created equal and should be treated as such by God, and elevate something that celebrates that value. I believe that everyone at this table and in this room could get around that and unify around that. And when I envision that, it moves me. It moves me because I think that would send a message to this country, which is so polarized and divided right now.
So you're all more than welcome to speak about this, ask questions of each other about this, ask questions of us about this.
Here's the picture of the statue, by the way, that we were looking at.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
Let me say something about that, Rabbi.
Yes, sir.
Is that...
Here you go. This is a slightly updated version.
Oh, sorry, I missed that.
Here you go.
That
Would you like a...
Oh, no, I've seen it. I've gotten it. Thank you.
there's a lot of discussion, frankly, on the other side about destruction, modification, alteration, whatever. So if we find something that's constructive that we can all get around, I am perfectly okay with that. And I'll give you an example. He was not a former slave, but Dr. John Lee Dickey from Taylor, he was an inspiration to the community.
For sure.
He
Yes.
was recognized by the community
Yes.
as Citizen of the Year, not once but twice. And he was a beacon for the people of
Very
color
much so.
as well as the whites. He was a unifying figure. He is, to me, one of the best examples there is of what we're talking about here. So, you know, from my perspective, he is not disrespecting my kinfolk, but he's at the same time, he is uplifting the other folks. So everybody agrees he's a great guy. I don't have any trouble with that, you know, because it's not a destructive, it's a constructive, and it's one of those things where we can, as a community, wrap ourselves around and say, you know, he done good, and he was someone that we can all look up to. That's all I want to say.
Kurt and I had even been discussing the idea of it being an anonymous, or maybe anonymous is the wrong word, but an unnamed statue,
Yes.
or naming the statue after someone. That's the template for that sculpture could be named obviously after him or maybe someone else. But I really do like what you're saying, which is be constructive and not destructive. And the conclusion that Kurt and I came up with is obviously not to be destructive. That's not the conclusion we came up with. Everyone's welcome to get feedback.
Well, I'm sorry, just one thing.
Please.
But, you know, Dr. Dickey's name on this statue or anything similar would not fly, because that's not what he represented, in my opinion.
Okay.
And so, if there is, you know, something that says who he is, what he did, and the picture of the man. Now, yeah, there can be some, we probably agree or maybe disagree, but what the representation should be, but this ain't it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. So I have two short points, I think. Number one, thank you to our moderators and folks who had a hand in organizing this. This happened formally today, which was great, and maybe that's how it had to start. These sorts of discussions don't need moderators. They just need two folks willing to have the discussion. And I know, Jaquita's group, Courageous Conversations, that's kind of what the name is predicated on. I wish, it's really easy to be at home or online or, on the phone and
Next
think,
door.
this, that, and the other. But when you sit across from somebody, it's humbling, number one, but also we're not as bold, and we're more our true selves, I think, when there's discourse. So I wish, Mr. Little, I would love to have a cup of coffee with you sometime, and we can agree to disagree, but we can be gentlemen at the same time. And I think that would be great, whether it's us or just folks in general. If we would be willing to have these difficult conversations, that would be fantastic. And then last thing is, for me at least, the issue of context is the most important thing. To have that statue out there with what I believe is grossly incomplete and somewhat misleading context as to what that means, certainly to everybody. Adding, fixing, contextualizing, just as an example, that was erected in 1916, and I don't believe that the Jim Crow laws were coming in at the same time, the Klan was rising at the same time, and that statue was constructed at the same time. I don't see those as disconnected events. Black folks in the South had started to make progress, and I think that's the context that spurred some of that pushback. And I think some of that pushback was the statue. So I think that's where we could have a meaningful discussion about, you see those as maybe coincidental, I see them as related. And so we could, talk about that sometime.
So what are your thoughts about the proposal of adding to this story?
I think some addition and some, I still would like to see some contextualization for what stands currently. And maybe that can be done as related to it, whether it's this or some other. I don't know that, I haven't decided what the right answer is for me.
It's just initial opinions.
But I think the discussion about what to add and how to add it, and that may be where we get a little crossways. But it's a discussion we need to have. I think adding some figure, some structure, as well as context for that structure and whatever else sits out there, we're not making a history dissertation on our square, but we could be more accurate than we are. And that shouldn't be that difficult to agree that we can do it, we need to do it, and then the sticky wicket might be how to do it. But
and certain things I do think we all agree here. I know you agree that the plaque that says that the
Oh, yes.
The Pioneer plaque should be changed.
Should
I think
be
we're all in
removed.
unanimous
Yes.
agreement on that.
Yeah.
Yes.
But, yeah.
And I know this is mainly the giving of feedback from you all. You said you had something.
Yeah, I don't think anybody has any issues at all with changing the plaque. I just don't see that happening. I do believe that if we're going to honor someone, we honor someone who's from Williamson County, who has that history here,
Interesting.
because that is our history. I mean, we all live in Williamson County now. That's probably what we want to talk about is Williamson County, because we're not going to fix the rest of the world. We can fix our portion of it.
Yes.
Now, I know one of the next statues that's been discussed is Jesse Daniel Ames.
Oh, good.
And I agree with that. She did,
Yes.
she brought 5,000 women into this courthouse square in the 20s. Oh my gosh, that must have been
Oh, yeah.
how many counties? So I'm in agreement with that, but if we want the doctor statue out there, that's great too.
Yeah.
That becomes a community decision, not just Georgetown, but Williamson County. And I have no issue at all. I think we should honor some of those people who were life-altering for the entire community.
Now, me personally, that's actually one of the reasons why I'm real big on unnamed statues. Just my own personal opinion, because it's able to honor all the men and women, both the soldiers and the sailors. It's easier to respect that, because if we go down the route of honoring a certain person, what happens if they have ghosts in their closet, and then these same types of things
That
pop up
eventually
like,
come
oh my
out.
goodness, we found out that
Yeah.
Jesse Daniel Ames, used to kill cats or something like that, and then someone's offended, which the millennials will increasingly get. So that's
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Stop.
that's one of the reasons why I'm a proponent of unnamed.
You're not beating up.
But I do believe that dedicating to a person might be able to honor how it's being honored to someone, but it still can be an unnamed.
Okay.
It's just my own personal thoughts, but I do think we the people, we Williamson County, we city of Georgetown, are able to have discussions that people they're too polarized to have right now, and I've enjoyed the civility of this. We've got a couple more minutes. Might as well go and use this time, but
I'd like to answer your question about the statue. I love the statue. I think it's beautiful. My issue is, again, the representation of this county. And I do love having the doctor as a representation. I think my major problem is that it doesn't go far enough. And like you said, a dissertation on the square is asking for too much. I think if we're going to have a statue that represents African American contributions, people of color contributions in the square, it should list all of them. And if not all of them,
unnamed.
at least unnamed, and representation of all of them, because there were a lot and they are nowhere to be found here. The good doctor is amazing, and it would be wonderful to see that. But there were so many more who fought against segregation, who fought against Jim Crow laws, who built this county for free.
It's interesting.
And I would like to see them represented in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And that's not even for me. That's for the people whose families still live over by the ridge, who know their families were part of building this county, but don't see that representation in our courthouse at all.
Well, I noticed the correspondence between that and the reasons you love the statue, because it's also unnamed.
Yes.
Yes. So
I'm
be
just
nice.
recognizing that.
Yes. Be very
But I'm
nice.
thinking, again, just from a practical standpoint, that if it has any chance of success, I will just tell you, it has got to have a connection to Williamson County.
Interesting.
And I'm just being from a practical matter, because I know how this process works. That is what it has to be.
Well, if it's unnamed, just like that statue was erected in 1916, unnamed, not any person attached. Our history starts right now in 2017. That would be the date that's put on it. That would be saying we are making history currently right now. We're not saying Jaquita, we're not saying Jonathan Dade, we're not saying Dr. Lee
Yes.
Dickey. I respect all these individuals. We're saying this is honoring any person.
Yes.
On this day, we're doing this honoring. However far back it goes, however far
Yes.
forward it goes, but we're doing this honor. Like I said, that's personally why I'm a a fan of unnamed because it does that. You're going to always miss someone. That's why you can never thank anyone for the efforts they do.
Yes.
It's like, I want to thank Bob over there. I want to thank Jimmy. And then
Yes.
Steven's like, you didn't thank me. And then he leaves the church. I'm sorry.
We'll do some counseling later. There's some counseling later.
Hypothetical situation. I think one of the other really big things is other cities are not able to do this. And this is where I almost disagree with Rob a little bit. No, y'all do need moderators. I personally believe theologians, people of moral compass, have had an instrument in shaping society and in shaping cultures throughout history. They've been able to help people do more than, like I said, politicians motivated by votes and business people motivated by dollars, profit. We're able to do something slightly different. I think we're able to be a catalyst to change and able to model examples that other people can follow. One of the most important also parts of this meeting that I think is important for us to be a catalyst for us to model, which is one of the reasons why we have videos here so other people can see this and they can maybe follow our example on this, is we all learn something from each other today. We all learn something positive from each other today. We connected with each other, we empathize with each other. If you all don't mind, as you all know is in the agenda, you're all going to take 1 or 2 minutes and just say some positives you learned from someone else here. Not necessarily the moderators, myself or Kurt, we're just moderators, but something you learned positive from any one of the other 4 participants. As we did before, Jaquita, we'll let the female go first.
Okay. I think what I got the most out of this was a really fascinating lesson on history and change, and the way it's seen in different lenses. And I like that because it gives me hope for the future. It gives me hope for our children who are going to sit at these tables and make these same discussions. And they may say, psh, take them all down. Like, we don't know what they're going to do in 40 years because they're going to be worse than millennials, So I think it was very positive for me to sit down and look at history and change from these different perspectives. It made me very hopeful for our future.
Thank you for sharing that, Jaquita. Shelby.
Well, face-to-face dialogue, there is no substitute for it because you cannot see that person through that computer or over that telephone line. You have got to see it face-to-face. And yeah, sometimes it does moderate your language and manner to a degree. But it's just like I tell my guys that we win people one person or a small group at a time. There is a reason that I stand out in front of that monument every day in April for Confederate History and Heritage Month. I don't go out and Shanghai anybody to come up and talk to me. They come up of their own volition. And we usually have a very good discourse. A lot of history takes place because that is what I regard as our job. Now, whether they agree with that, don't believe me, go look it up. And it's amazing, as we've maybe talked about, is that there's such a lack of actual knowledge. Not Southern knowledge, not Northern knowledge, but knowledge, period, about that time in our history, or basically any history for that matter. And that is where we are doing a disservice, not only to our fellow citizens, but to our kids and grandkids who say, I don't have time for that. Oh, what'd you say? Take this thing out of my ear. And that is what has to be overcome. Now, whatever viewpoint you have, those kids they're gonna live with until they find out different. And that's what we have to make it the truth. That is what is so important, no matter which side we're coming from. I don't know if that answers your question, sir. But
This is just what I learned. That's exactly it. Thank you.
That's what I got to say.
Rob.
Well, I learned that I found it really interesting, Mr. Little. And again, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but what I kind of heard at the beginning was, there's probably not going to be any compromise, I think was intimated. But I think that's why these discussions are important, because what we learned through discussion was you definitely don't want the monument removed, but is there something that can be done to add to the teaching of history, to add to the context? You are open to that. And I think a lot of folks are, but again, it requires this sort of a maybe moderated, maybe not moderated setting.
So we're important.
You need me.
You need this gig. So, I think, and I don't think you compromise any of your core beliefs to say, we could do something out there. So this is the beginning. This is the beginning of this discussion, as the beginning of many other discussions. Some things we didn't get to today, I think they're tangentially related. When we talked about the reputation of Williamson County, you said it has a reputation as a law and order community. I would have picked the word racist because I think it does. That's another discussion maybe we can flesh out on another day. How can we be better about that as a community, whether it's the actual existence and perpetuation of racism or just the reputation of racism. But that's a further discussion that I believe is related to this. So we need more of this. But I was really encouraged that we were just able to be here and kind of find whatever common ground we have and see what we can cobble together given that common ground. We didn't solve all the world's or even Georgetown's problems today, but it's a step. And again, I'm just thankful to be here. Thanks, y'all.
I learned that we're not that much different.
Not at all.
And I'm not surprised by that. I think we all have essentially the same goals in mind. We have different ways of reaching them.
Well, it was on the agenda for me to close the roundtable by 1:30. That's why you do need a moderator. Closed here, a couple minutes to 1:30. I'm going to end in prayer, and then of course everyone is welcome to dialogue with the media, dialogue with each other. I think what Rob was saying, the dialogue needs to continue. This should not be the first, it should not be the only, it should not be the last. But I really do think it is our duty as neighbors, as fellow community people to get together to talk about things to improve our PR. And this is exactly why Kurt and I started the Georgetown Civil Rights Initiative. We're nobody, okay? We have our churches. We're just that's our job. But we said, what can we do to help? Maybe there's not committees. Maybe there's not enough groups getting traction, and we're trying to get traction. We don't have all the answers, but we put together a mission statement as best we could, and we said we're going to try. And I think just this very first meeting that we did of people coming together was amazing. How much money have we raised for this statue or whatever the statue ends up looking like? $0 to date. Right? That's what theologians do. But we're trying. We're trying to stage dialogue. We're trying to get people together. I ask if you can convince your friends, your family, those local to connect with either Kurt or myself. Email us, call us. Our contact information is on our respective congregational websites. We have the Georgetown Civil Rights Initiative. People say, why is it on my church webpage? I don't own a lot of web pages, all right? So I use the tools and resources I have. Kurt does as well. Why does his email, his email it is? It's the email it is because the one he's got. If you all please allow me, I understand we all have different faith backgrounds, but just because it's important to me, I personally do believe that us theologians have a purpose, and I do believe that by coming together and allowing us to pray, allowing us to help moderate, that we're actually able to achieve something I think natural man cannot achieve by themselves. It's my personal opinion. I understand we all just met each other, and not everyone has clean hands, but if you will. God, I thank you for giving us the ability today to come together as neighbors, to come together as your sons and daughters, and to come together and realize how we all are created equal. I also thank you for giving us the freedoms we have to enjoy this food on dry ground in this restaurant. And I pray, God, that what we do today is able to model your love that you have for your people, and that other cities and communities are encouraged by this. And I pray for this in the name of your Son, Yeshua Messiah, in Hebrew, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.